Okay, welcome everyone. Those that are here and those that are going to watch the recording later. We have a fascinating class today. It's a topic that I'm excited about. You'll see in the class says why. We're going to learn something in this week's Torah portion, and we're going to tie it in to the history of the Cantonists or the Cantonisten. If you don't know what it is, you'll definitely be interested to learn. And more importantly, like every single week, we're going to take away a practical lesson that each and every one of us could learn from this class. It's not just learning the Torah, learning something that happened to our father Yaakov, Jacob. Like I always tell people, the word history is made up of his story. It has nothing to do with me. The word Torah, the Rebbe would say again and again, comes from the word hira, which means there's a lesson. There's a lesson that we have to learn from the Torah portion. So we'll get straight into the class. In this week's portion we learn how Yaakov is finally making his journey back to Israel. He had a brother by the name of Esav, was a twin by the way, who was upset that Jacob got the blessing from his father and he didn't get it. And he wanted to kill his brother. His mother, Rivkah, told him to go to the family. And he went, he traveled, and he got married. He had a hard life. He was supposed to marry one girl, he was supposed to marry Rachel, he was given Leah. He worked 14 years for his two wives, seven for one, 7 for the next. And then 6 years he worked to finally get a bit of a paycheck. 20 years later, by now he's already a wealthy man. He has his family. He already has 11 sons, and he has a daughter. And he's going back to Israel. But he knows that his brother is still angry, and he's not sure to what degree. So our rabbis tell us he prepared for 3 things. He prayed to God. He prepared a gift. When you give someone something, many times they calm down. You know, give them something good. He prepared a big gift. And he prepared for war, just in case. He prepared for war. Now, obviously, he was hoping that he would never have to go to war. A lot of times you prepare for war, just that the fact that you're strong, people see you're strong, this in itself has the people back off. They're not just starting up. So Yaakov didn't obviously want to fight. He wanted to have peace. Before he gets to his brother, and he knows that his brother still wants to fight him, as he's traveling, there was a little stream. And Yaakov took his wives and his kids over the stream. And then the Torah tells us as following. I'll read it inside. I'll go through it quickly. Vayavaser Yaakov levadi. And Jacob was left himself on the other side of the stream. Vayavik ish imay. And a man wrestled with him. Ad alot hashachar. Until the break of dawn. We'll soon see who this man was. Vayarki lo yacholei. When this man saw that he's not winning over Jacob, Vayiga bekaf yireche. He touched the socket of Jacob's hip. Vayomer shalcheni. This man says, "Let me go." Ki ala ashachar, because the morning is starting. It's coming. It's about to, it's getting light outside. Dawn is breaking. Vayomer, and Jacob replies, "Loi ashal lechecha, I will not let you go. Ki im barachtani. You give me a blessing, I'll let you go. You don't bless me, you're not going." Vayomer love. So this man says, "Mashmecha, what's your name?" Vayomer Yaakov. He says, "My name is Jacob, Yaakov." Vayomer lo Yaakov yomer shimcha ki im Yisrael. Your name is no more Jacob. Your name is Yisrael. Ki serisei melikim v'manashim v'tuchal. Because you have been commanding power with an angel of God and with men, and you have prevailed. That's the first time you have the name Yisrael. Later on in the Torah portion, God himself gives Yaakov the name Yisrael. And then the Torah goes on to say that Yaakov asks him his name. He doesn't want to give him his name. And then the Torah says, Vayizech le'ashemesh, as the sun rose, Kasher over as Peniel v'tzlei reiche. Yaakov passed a place called Peniel, limping on his thigh. He was injured. Remember, he gave him a zetz. He hit him in the hip. And the Torah concludes, in this concept that we need to know, Al kain therefore lo yechu b'nei Yisrael segid anasha. Therefore, the Jewish people will not eat what's known as the sciatic nerve of an animal. Asher al kaf hayerech ad yom hazeh, which is on the socket of the hip until this day. Ki naga b'kaf yerech Yaakov begid anasha. Because this man touched the socket of Jacob's hip in the displaced tendon where Yaakov was hit. So we have a story. Yaakov encounters a man. This man was none other than the angel of Esav that wished to destroy him. Esav had angels as well, and he wished to literally kill Yaakov. And it was tight. They were wrestling. It wasn't an easy fight. But at the end, Yaakov prevails, but he gets injured in the way. And because of that injury, till today, we do not eat a certain vein in the animal, we'll call it the sciatic nerve of the foot of an animal, because our father Jacob was struck there. Now, most of us have no clue where this nerve is, because today, when you buy meat, it's different than back in the day. Today, you go into any store you're going in to buy your kosher meat, wherever it may be, the Olive Branch, Sobeys, whichever store you're going into to buy it, and they have nice cut up pieces of meat, and you pick it up and it's kosher, you go home. But back in the day, people would actually bring their animal or the chicken to a sheikhet, to someone that would slaughter it, and then you would take it home, and you would have to go through it yourself. For example, every Jewish mother, not until too long ago, knew how to salt a chicken. Today, you tell a person to salt a chicken, the lady's going to freak out. You're sugaring, you're nuts, you're crazy. But up until not too long ago, even in Israel, many people remember, they went to the shuk, they went to the marketplace, they bought a chicken, the sheikh shechted it, and then you did it, a lot of people did it, and then the Jewish mothers, that's one of the things that they knew how to do very, very well. So today we don't have that. Today you go to the store and you get already a nice packed chicken, and it's already salted for you, the blood is taken out, it's all good to go. The only reason I'm mentioning this is because we don't really know what the Gid Anashi is unless you're working in producing kosher meat. Then you know exactly which nerve you have to take out, and it's a very, very hard one to take out. So many places it is the whole section that has that foot, they don't bother using it, unless there's someone that really, really knows how to clean it well. So why don't we eat it? Because Yaakov wrestled with an angel, and the angel struck Yaakov, and therefore till today, thousands of years later, the Jewish people do not eat this. And this is one of the 613 commandments. One of the 613 commandments is what the Torah tells us which part of an animal we're not supposed to eat. And the question is, what's the significance of it? Because Yaakov wrestled and fought with an angel and he hit him in the foot, and if he would have hit him in the chest or in the stomach, then the whole animal wouldn't be able to eat. Like, what's going on here? What's the message here? So I'm going to start off the class by reading from the Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch is a book that gives an explanation for every single mitzvah. It gives us the back end, so to speak. It gives a reasoning behind it. Now, I must share a story. There was once a rabbi that came to the Lubavitch Rebbe for a private audience, and the Rebbe asked him, rabbi in Israel, big rabbi, and the Rebbe asked him, what is he teaching? And he told the Rebbe he's giving a class, the Sefer HaChinuch, he's explaining the mitzvahs. So the Rebbe told him, when you give the class, the introduction should be the first reason why we do a mitzvah is because God told us to do so. Every mitzvah. And then we try to understand other things as well. But that, I'm just saying, there's the foundation of whatever we do because Hashem says, and then there's other reasons, other things that we could perhaps understand. So I'll read you what the Sefer Chinuch writes. He writes as follows. The commandment not to eat this particular part of the animal, the sciatic nerve, this commandment serves as a reminder to the Jewish people Although they will endure many troubles and exile in the hands of the nations and the descendants of Esav, they should have faith, they should be clear, they should have trust and know that they will not perish. Rather, their descendants and name will endure forever. And eventually, the Redeemer will come and save them from all of their oppressors. And by constantly remembering this mitzvah, this will guarantee that through the commandment they will remain steadfast in their faith and righteousness for all time. The message is hinted by the angel who wrestled with our forefather Jacob. According to the tradition, which is brought down in the Medrash and Bereishis Rabbah, that this angel was the guardian of angel of Esav, like we mentioned before. He wanted to eliminate Jacob completely. He wanted to eliminate Jacob, his kids, his descendants, but he was not successful. Instead, he caused him the pain by injuring his thigh. Similarly, the descendants of the kids of Esav are going to cause suffering to the descendants of the kids of Jacob, which is the Jewish people. And at the end, there's going to be a salvation, and they're going to be saved, and nothing is going to happen. So what does he say? That the reason why we do not eat the sciatic nerve today is that we should remember that our father Jacob was almost killed by an angel that wanted to destroy him, eliminate him and his descendants. He was not successful. He was only successful in injuring him. And therefore, we should also know we're also going to have problems. But ultimately, we will prevail. No one's going to be able to take us out completely. Nachmanides, known in Hebrew as the Ramban, one of the foremost commentaries on the Torah, he touches upon it in a little bit more detail. And he says as following. When he saw he couldn't prevail against Jacob, his angels, mighty in strength, fulfill his will. And therefore, what he did was, he actually injured him. Because the only thing that the angel was permitted to do was to dislocate his hip, was to give him an injury in his hip. That was the only thing he was able to do. He was not able to take him out, but he was able to injure him, yeah. And he goes on to say something fascinating. It's brought down in the Midrash. He didn't just strike Jacob, he didn't just hit Jacob, but he hit all the righteous people that are going to come out of him. This is the generation of persecution. The meaning is that the event is an allusion for the future generations. There's going to be a generation from the descendants of Jacob. That descendants of Esav are going to be very strong on them. To the point, until they're always going to wipe them out. And then he concludes, and this almost happened in the times of the rabbis of the Mishnah. There was a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava and his friends. And then he goes on to say, he quotes what it says. There was a great rabbi that said, Omer Rabbi Chaim Barabba, if someone tells me to give up my life sanctifying God's name, I give it. But they should kill me right away. But if it's a time where there's persecution against the Jewish people, Eini yochel lisbo. It's one of the greatest rabbis. Said, I would not be able to sustain because how hard it was. And he goes on to say, what are one of the things that they used to do during this time? They brought metal bowls. They would put it in the fire until it became extremely hot. And then they would put it under the armpit of a person until their souls would go out. And then he goes on to say, there were generations that we went through a lot worse suffering than that. And as bad as it was very difficult. Ultimately, we prevailed. This is what the Nachmanides, the Ramban, adds to the explanation that we said earlier on from the Sefer HaChinuch. And eventually, the Jewish people prevailed. And that is in 1827. In 1827, for the Jewish people that were living in Russia, former Soviet Union at the time, there was a terrible decree made by the Tsar Nicholas that they're going to go ahead and take Jewish children at a young age and bring them into the army. For 25 years, they're going to be taken as kids, youngsters, 13-year-old, 18 years old, from 18 years old or younger, 13 years old. And they're going to have to get an education of non-Jewish people. They're not going to be able to eat kosher. No letters written to them in Yiddish, language that many Jews spoke at the time, will be allowed in, only in Russian. They'll not be able to visit their families. Their families will not be able to visit them. And one of the most important things that he thought he's going to accomplish through this was that they're going to lose their religion and eventually they're going to convert. And they were taken by force. The Jewish communities had to provide a certain amount of boys to be taken to the army. And if they would not provide those kids, the government had a right to come into those communities and do whatever they wanted to the community, take as many as they wanted. Either they gave a certain amount of kids, there was a certain quota that they had, was a big one, or they would go ahead and make problems to that community. And the leaders had to go ahead and bring the kids. As you could understand, no one volunteered to go. You're sending your kid, it's a minimum of 25 years, he's not coming back home, and he's going to lose his Jewish values. So what happened was there were people that would snatch children, grab them and take them. They said, these are the kids that came from this town, this city, and by this, the quota was filled. These people were known, in Yiddish there's a word called chappers, those that would grab the children. They would grab the children and take them. And you could imagine parents would hide their kids, especially in the time when they thought there's going to be people coming to take to the army. They would hide their kids in order they should not have to go ahead and take them. They shouldn't take their children. And these people were known as the Cantonists. The Cantonists was the barracks, the places where they lived. And it was a terrible, terrible decree for the Jewish people. The second Rebbe of Chabad gave a discourse, a Hasidic discourse that starts with the words in order to understand the concept of the Jewish people being taken away to be brought to non-Jewish people to go to the army. And according to some, that's what caused him to become sick and passed away. He passed away a week after he gave over that discourse. It was also in the same year. Just to explain a little bit what the Cantonists went through, the hardships that they went through, and we'll see soon, despite having such little Jewish education in such a crucial time, as a young teenager, adulthood, many of them had tremendous self-sacrifice to remain Jewish people. I'll just mention that I'm a descendant of one of the Cantonists. My grandfather, Rabbi Chaim Hildeshaim, Oholei Torah, he wrote a sefer, he wrote a book on Jewish law, and in there he writes that his mother Rachel, her father was one of the Cantonists. Again, eventually he made it to Poland. Again, Russia and Poland, the border was pretty close, depending which part of the former Soviet Union we're in. And they had tremendous self-sacrifice to keep Judaism alive. And I'll share with you just a few stories before we go into the actual learning of it and the lesson that we could take from this. After they came out of their 25 plus years of being in the Russian army and not being in a regular surroundings, and one of the things they would take them is they would teach them to go steal food from other places. They made them live a life, like a really low life, not in any way, a way that's befitting for the Jewish people. And they hung around all different types of people. Eventually, when they came back, they didn't fit into regular society. A lot of them did not fit into regular society. They couldn't fit in. They went through torture. A lot of them died by being beaten up. They were strong. They were built from all the years that they were working there. And they weren't as educated as everyone else. And they built their own shuls. They had what's called the Cantonist shuls. There's a shul that still stands today, a big wood old shul, somewhere in Siberia. I think it's in Tomsk, Siberia, known as a shul that was called the Cantonist shul. They built their own shuls for themselves. They should be able to fit in. And they say when it came Simchat Torah, a regular person wouldn't be able to keep up with their dancing. They would dance like the Cossacks. This is where they hung out. They hung out with such type of people for so many years. When it came the last Hakafah, we know in Simchat Torah, we have 7 Hakafot, 7 times that we take out the Torahs, we dance around the bima. When it came to the last one, the peak of the holiday, they would take off their shirts, and they had scars. They were beaten in the army to stand strong. They were able to survive. And they would hold the Torah close to their skin, and they would dance like crazy while holding the Torah with the seventh Hakafah, dancing with everything that they went through. Because they understood that this is what kept them going. It was the Torah that they believed in. The Rebbes of Chabad did a lot to try to send them packages. If it was tefillin, if it was matzah, try to smuggle in, to try to give them encouragement whenever they had opportunity to speak to these kids. Some of them were growing up. There's a very famous story that there was once one of the, maybe it was the Tsar himself, came to visit these children, and he asked them their names. This one said, "My name is Moshe." This one said, "My name is Chaim." He says, "What's going on over here? You guys weren't they didn't already make you convert to Christianity. Right now, every single one of you is converting." And they were standing on a bridge. There was a group of them. And the story goes that they didn't want to convert. They said, "No way." And they jumped into the water, and that's it, and they died. In order not to live a life, God forbid, not as a Jew. They literally went and self-sacrificed just to make sure that they're going to die as a Jew. The numbers that I read was that it lasted for 30 years. This particular group of the Cantonists, which say for such a long time. Usually the army is a few years. This decree lasted for 30 years. In that time, they took 70,000 Jewish people to the army for that period of time. It's a very long time. And many, many people, sadly, were either lost, physically they were killed. Some of them, sadly, were not able to withstand the different tests and trials and tribulations that they went through. No one could judge anyone. And many of them had tremendous self-sacrifice and survived despite everything that they went through. So what I'm going to read now is a talk that the Rebbe, Lubavitch Rebbe, gave. And he mentions this Hasidic discourse that the second Rebbe of Chabad, whose yard set, by the way, was this week, the Mittler Rebbe. The Mittler Rebbe, he was born and passed away on Tes Kislev, the 9th day of Kislev, which was this week. And again, he said a special discourse for these boys to strengthen them. So I'll read you what the Rebbe writes, and most importantly, the lesson, how it applies to us. Like I said before, it's very nice to read a history, but nothing to do with me. We're going to finish off to see how the lesson of the Cantonists, how the lesson of Jacob, that we start off with, how it applies to me and you living today in Canada, or wherever else you may live. So the Rebbe said as following. In the later years of the Mittler Rebbe, which is the second Rebbe of Chabad, the Cantonist decree of seizing Jewish children for army service begun. The Mittler Rebbe, as he was known, the second Rebbe of Chabad, addressed the matter in a Hasidic discourse titled "To Understand Lahavin Inyan Kiches Anshe Chayil Misol Biad Nachrim," to understand the seizing of Jews by non-Jews to serve as soldiers. Usually, a Hasidic discourse always starts off on a verse in the Torah. In order to give strength to what they needed, the actual discourse started off explaining what's going on over here. And he goes on to say, now, let me just give an introduction. He is not going to explain why God did this, because we don't understand the ways of Hashem. What he is going to explain is, someone that went through that particular situation, what is it that they could learn? What does God want from them at the moment when they're going through all these tragedies, when they're going through such difficulties to live a life like a Jew? Again, we're not here to explain why God did it. We're here to explain what Hashem wanted from the person while they're going through it. And we'll see how this applies to each and every one of us. And over there he explains, although they cannot fulfill many mitzvahs, many commandments of God. Why? For a simple reason. They don't have tefillin. They don't have matzah. They're not allowed to do it. They can't. Mikol Malkim, nevertheless, how precious it is from God for those few mitzvahs that they were able to do. Again, most of the commandments they were not able to do. But there was the few that an opportunity came up, they were able to make, if it was a blessing, or say Shema when no one was looking, whatever mitzvah it may be, which was something that obviously took tremendous amount of self-sacrifice. And the Rebbe said then, because regarding other mitzvot, self-sacrifice won't help. It's impossible to do it. What are you going to do? Self-sacrifice for what? To create matzah, the munch should fall from heaven. God doesn't want it to happen. It's not going to happen. There was only the few things that did come up that they were able to do a mitzvah. Most of the mitzvot they were not able to do. Even if you want to have self-sacrifice, I cannot do it. There's nothing I can do about it. I don't have tefillin. I don't have kosher food. Okay, maybe they try to keep kosher as best as possible. I don't have matzah on Pesach. I don't have a lulav in a truck for Sukkot. There's certain things I just can't do. Second Rebbe of Chabad, who gave this discourse as this decree was coming into effect, said that those mitzvahs that they are going to be able to do, those few mitzvahs they're going to be able to do, they're going to be able to sneak in a mitzvah here and there with self-sacrifice. These mitzvahs outweigh everything that they can't do. So you have a person that has many mitzvahs that they could do. Here they have finally an opportunity to do one little mitzvah. They're squeezing in a mitzvah with tremendous self-sacrifice. That particular mitzvah outweighs everything else that they were not able to do. And he goes on to explain as follows. That this is not just regarding the Cantonists at that time, in the early 1800s. But this, early to mid 1800s. But this applies to other people that don't have that opportunity. For example, there are children that are held captive and raised without Jewish knowledge. It's known as a child. If you take a kid at 3 years old and he grows up in a non-Jewish family, it happened, for example, during World War II. And he lives with that family for 20, 30 years. Then he finds out that he's Jewish. Or even if he was told that he's Jewish, what do you expect from that kid? He never had opportunity. And now that he finally starts to learn, then it's also a tremendous amount of self-sacrifice to do even one mitzvah, because he didn't grow up with it. And he asks a question regarding such a child that was captured among non-Jews, did not grow up in a Jewish environment, a Jewish kid. He says, the question can be asked, since he does not fulfill Torah mitzvot, it looks like this person has no purpose to be in this world. Why did his or her soul come down to this world? We know that a Jew comes down to this world, the purpose why we come down here is that we should be able to fulfill what God wants. But what happens if they don't have the opportunity to do so? For many years, they grew up as a child, not their fault, without having a Jewish education. So what's the purpose of this kid coming down to this world? And they're not a kid anymore, they're an adult. And the Rebbe goes on to say, regarding a regular Jew, that they didn't do Torah mitzvot, I understand. That was a decision that they made. We all make decisions in life. One of the most fundamental parts of Judaism is that you have bechira chavshus, freedom of choice. If you made a bad decision, you made a stupid decision, you're going to have to pay for it. That's just the way. That's just the way of life. But what happens if a person was not able to make that decision? They were forced in a situation that didn't even know that there's a decision that could be made. They never really experienced it. They never really felt it. How can such a person fulfill a mission that he came down to this world for? As a Jew, we come down to this world to fulfill the will of God. And this particular person does not have the ability to do so. Why? Because they never had the opportunity. So if they never had the opportunity, what's the purpose of such a person coming down to this world? Why did the soul come down to this world? Again, we're not talking about a person that has made a choice. And he goes on to say as following. The question can be answered, the Rebbe said, based upon the discourse of the Mittler Rebbe, one that we quoted earlier on. That b'meshech hazman, over the course of time, bevadei es minilim l'mayla, it is for sure that he's going to have the opportunity presented in front of him. L'chol ha'poches inyan echad, sheyivad lo doisav, v'til lo yichol s'kaima. Even if a person grew up without knowing nothing, eventually they're going to find out about one mitzvah that they're going to have the ability to do. And since until now, they never knew about any mitzvahs. And even this mitzvah they're going to do, it's going to be self-sacrifice. They never grew up with it. It's not going to be easy. They're going to have to overcome it, overcome different challenges. Because it's difficult, it's considered self-sacrifice. It is definitely that such a person is going to do this mitzvah with tremendous passion. I never had the opportunity to do a mitzvah. Now I found out about one little mitzvah. And I never had the opportunity. Now I'm going to have a passion. I want to do it in the right way. This is something that's extremely precious by God, by our Father in heaven. That it's worthwhile for such a soul to come down to this world for many years. In order that she be able to fulfill one mitzvah, but with a vitality, with a geschmack, with an enjoyment. So you have many times a person is born into a family that wasn't observant in any way, and all of a sudden they find out there's a concept, one mitzvah, lighting Shabbat candles, for example. Wow, that's a beautiful thing. I can bring the light of Shabbat into my home. What happens next? When they start to do that one mitzvah, it's difficult. They have to be at a certain time. They never grew up with it, but that becomes an enjoyment in their life. You know what happens at that moment? By God, that's something that's a tremendous, tremendous joy. Especially because we were not able to do it all these years. And it's more precious in a sense by God when someone does something with so much joy and so much enthusiasm than someone does the mitzvah, someone that could be doing the mitzvah his entire life. Then the Rebbe went on to say, this does not only apply to a person that grew up in such a situation, but applies to everyone. Why? Because at the end of the day, no one's perfect. That's what the Rebbe says. No one's perfect. It says, Ein tzadik ba'aretz sheyasu tov v'lo yechta. There you don't even have one person that only does good and doesn't sin. The reality in life is we all mess up, sadly. I shouldn't say all, most of us. And therefore, in a certain sense, we're all also considered like a tinnik shenishba. We're all considered like many years we grew up not doing things that we were supposed to do. The Rebbe goes on to say that his father-in-law would always say that years aren't counted according to the years of a passport. The passport says you're 75, you're 35, 85, 95. It doesn't go according to the passport. But it goes according to the years what you did for Torah mitzvot. So you could have a person that could be 80 years old, but they're considered young. They're considered like a kid because they're only starting now to find out about certain Jewish concepts. And the Rebbe concluded the talk by saying, and therefore, a person has to realize they should never despair. I repeat, doesn't make a difference where you are. There's no such a thing of zlihiteesh, yiyush, to despair. That doesn't exist in the Jewish language. It's true that maybe you're not exactly like the Cantonists. You didn't grow up in such harsh conditions. You grew up, maybe you had all the food that you wanted. You had the shuls maybe not too far from you, but you never did it for whatever the reason was. Or if you did it, you missed out on certain things. A person has to realize whatever passed. What's important now is, where are you going to go from here? And that is, a person has to take upon themselves that what I'm going to do now, I'm going to do with tremendous vitality. I'm going to do it in a way that I'm going to make up for everything else that I lost. Because I realized that I did not have the opportunity to live the way I should have all these years, and now I see there's an opportunity to do a mitzvah. When I connect to that mitzvah, I do it with joy. I do it with enthusiastic about it. And that makes up for all the other times that I was not able to do it. This talk the Rebbe gave 1954. 10 years later, there was a chassid that came out of Russia. Reb Mendel Futefas, many of you might have heard many stories. He sat in the gulags for many years. And he finally came out, after many, many years. And he was by the Farbrengen. Before the Farbrengen, the Rebbe asked to get a copy of this mimer, this discourse that the Mittler Rebbe said to the Cantonists. And again, it wasn't able to be found, wasn't printed yet. Someone had a little copy here, a little piece there. And the Rebbe then spoke about this concept that you could have a person that do mitzvahs, but they just do it because that becomes the norm. You have to put on film, you put on film, but they're lacking the vitality. They're lacking the enjoyment in how things should be able to do. And the Rebbe said, what we have to learn from this is, the Rebbe quoted this discourse as well, is whatever mitzvah we're doing, it should be like something that we did not have the opportunity to do it, and now we have the opportunity to do it, and therefore the enjoyment is so much stronger. So the takeaway is as following. Our father Yaakov was hit in the thigh, symbolizing there's going to be problems that the Jewish people are going to be going through. But at the end of the day, they're not going to be successful. The Jewish people will always prevail. At the same time, what we have to realize is, no matter what hardships we go through, it depends on us to make sure that we cherish the mitzvahs that we could do. Let's learn from those Cantonists, which went through many years of being away from their families, away from the Jewish community, given an education that tried the best possible to brainwash them away from Judaism, and nevertheless, thousands and thousands and thousands of these Cantonists came back. Some joined the regular communities, some built their own communities. Like I said, I'm a descendant of one of these Cantonists. Because when they came back, they took every mitzvah they were able to do, and they did it with such vitality, with such strength. So we're living today in a time, we thank God, for the most part, We have the opportunity to do any mitzvah that we want. And therefore we must realize that if we had time that we did not do it, if there was time that was lost, we must do whatever we possibly can to make sure that the mitzvahs that we start to now with a tremendous vitality. And those that do mitzvahs, after we do it for many times, for many years, sometimes it becomes dry. We have to learn from them to do it with the vitality, like the Rebbe said. The Rebbe was crying that there are people that cannot do the mitzvahs. People that were in the former Soviet Union, many of the Jews were not able to do it. Rebbe said they can't do the mitzvahs. But the little mitzvahs they're able to do here and there, this is even late many years, was a tremendous joy by them. There's someone in the shul here, he told me, when a Jewish book came, he was in Moscow, came to Moscow, managed to be smuggled in. There was a line to get the book. It's not like you go to the library, you take it out for 2 weeks. You had it for the night, the next guy had it for the day, night. People read the book cover to cover, and it went from one person to the next, to the next, to the next. They're able to finally grab onto something Judaism, that's something that anything Jewish they're able to get their hands on. There was a lineup of people that were trusted. It went from one to the next. Today we're living in a time, whatever you want, in any language, is available. English, Russian, French, Japanese, whatever you want. You want the Torah, you have it translated. You're too lazy to read, you have audio classes, you have video classes. You want the Talmud, you have the Talmud. You want the Zohar, in any language. Today everything is available. But we're lacking sometimes the enthusiasm to go ahead and learn, to go ahead and have the ability to enjoy, to be able to do a mitzvah. So let us recognize the times that we're in. Let us have the best of both worlds. Let us recognize that for most of us, we have the ability to do the mitzvot. And this that we didn't know until now doesn't make a difference how old we are, 70, 80 years old. On the contrary. By Hashem, when we're going to finally do a mitzvah, we're going to finally do things in the right way. It's everything in life. By God, that's so much more precious. Because you're doing it with so much joy, so much vitality. Let us make the most of it, and let us treasure all the opportunities that we have, do what God wants. And B'ezrat Hashem, we'll have all the blessings until we'll have the ultimate blessing when we're all going to be cured in the materialistic sense, in the physical sense, in the spiritual sense, with the coming of Mashiach, may it be spilled in our days. Any questions on the class? All right, we'll take it all in. All right. Say that. All right.